Came home for my birthday, Dad said. Don't expect a gift, you earn nothing. And my brother laughed. I said, cool, I just took back the house. Then watched their faces drop. It wasn't supposed to be a grand return. Just me, back home for my 34th birthday, standing on the porch of the same old house that used to feel like a cage. The kind of place that hums with the tension of old arguments still echoing off the walls. I hadn't been back in years, not for Christmas, not for Thanksgiving, and definitely not for birthdays. But this year, something pulled me in. Closure, maybe? A full circle moment. Or maybe I just needed to look them in the eye one last time. Dad opened the door. His gut had grown, his hair had thinned, but that smug grin hadn't aged a day. Oh, look who decided to show up, he said, stepping aside like he was doing me a favor. Don't expect a gift. You earn nothing. My brother Mark chuckled from the kitchen, like it was the funniest punchline he'd heard all year. And just like that, we were right back to the way things had always been, me, the screw-up, them, the smug royalty in their crumbling little kingdom. But they didn't know. They had no idea who they were talking to anymore. I walked in slow, eyes drifting across the familiar disaster of a living room. Same cracked leather sofa? Same peeling wallpaper. But the deed? That had changed. And I couldn't help it, I smiled. Cool, I said, pulling the manila envelope from my coat pocket. I just took back the house. Mark stopped laughing. Dad froze mid-step. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in your bones. The kind of quiet you wait your whole life for. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to buy the house out from under them. This wasn't revenge, it was math. A slow burn. Years in the making. It started with a phone call. I was knee-deep in spreadsheets for a property deal in Atlanta when an old neighbor, Mrs. Langford, called out of the blue. Said she saw a for sale sign on the lawn of my childhood home. Your daddy selling? She asked, like I was supposed to know. I remember blinking at my screen, confused. I hadn't spoken to my father in years. Hadn't heard anything about a sale. Last I knew, he was still clinging to that house like it was some monument to his manhood. He might be, I said, but I'll look into it. I hung up and pulled up the property records. That house was the one thing I thought he'd never part with. Too much pride, too much ego. But sure enough, there it was, a quiet listing under a trust name I didn't recognize. Nothing flashy. No big signs. Just a silent little attempt to offload the only real asset he had left. And that's when the first ember caught fire. He never told me. Not a word. Not even a courtesy call. The house my grandfather built, the same one I once scraped paint off in the summer sun for $10 and a sandwich, it was being quietly sold. Without so much as a heads up. I should have been angry. But I wasn't. I was curious. And curiosity is a dangerous thing when you have money, contacts, and something to prove. I didn't go straight to him. That would have been too easy. Instead, I made a call to a friend of mine, Jordan, real estate attorney with a talent for making paperwork dance. We traced the trust holding the property. It was thin, barely held together by shell layers and fake names, but we pulled the thread until it led back to, surprise, Mark. My brother. The golden boy. The one who never worked a day in his life but always managed to land on his feet, right in the middle of someone else's efforts. I should have known. Dad never moved a muscle unless Mark was getting something out of it. That night I called Mark. Hey, I said casually. You selling the house? He paused. What house? Come on. Don't play stupid. Dad's? Or is it yours now? Another pause, this one heavier. It's not what you think. That's always the line, isn't it? Turns out, Dad was planning to transfer the house quietly into Mark's name, some early inheritance nonsense, so Mark could sell it, pocket the cash, and get out of the mountain of debt he'd racked up trying to be a music producer. I guess scamming friends and dodging rent finally caught up to him. And me? I was never part of the plan. You didn't think I'd find out? I asked him. Look, he said. It's not personal. You're doing fine. You don't need it. And just like that, there it was. The old family chorus. You don't need it. You don't matter. Be grateful we didn't take more. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. But in that moment, something shifted. They weren't just selling the house. They were erasing me from it. And I wasn't about to let that happen. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. That's the part they never saw coming. Instead, I took the quiet route, the same one they thought made me weak all those years ago. But this time, the silence was power. I called Jordan again. Buy it, I said. You sure? Through the shell company. Full cash offer. No contingencies. It cost me more than I wanted to spend on that place, I won't lie. But it wasn't about money. It was about making sure they never got to rewrite the story. The house was never theirs. It was mine, because I earned the life that gave me the means to take it back. 3 weeks later, the deed was signed over. Funny thing was, Dad never noticed. The trust had been looking to sell quick and quiet. Jordan moved fast, the paperwork was airtight, and within a month, the very house my father and brother thought they'd flipped into a payday was owned by a silent LLC, mine. All legal. All clean. And they didn't suspect a thing. I didn't tell anyone. I waited. I let them go on thinking they were in control. I waited for the right moment, one that mattered to them. My birthday. The day they used to forget, or worse, weaponize. And when Dad smirked and said, "Don't expect a gift," I smiled. Because I had already given myself the only gift I ever needed. Closure. I stood in the living room, that musty air pressing in from every corner. The same worn carpet, the same yellowed blinds Dad refused to replace. I watched Mark's laughter stutter into silence, and Dad's smirk stiffen like he hadn't heard me right. I just took back the house, I said again, slower this time, handing Dad the envelope. He took it with a scoff, like I'd handed him a grocery receipt. But then he opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His hand started to shake just slightly, paper rattling like it caught a breeze that wasn't there. "What is this?" he barked. Mark stepped closer, still clinging to that frat boy arrogance. "What's he talking about, Dad?" "It's the deed," I said, locking eyes with him. "The house belongs to Morningside Holdings." "That's me. I bought it last month." Dad blinked. No, this is some kind of trick. You can't just." "I can," I said calmly. And I did. Mark snatched the papers from him, flipping through with increasing speed like more pages might reverse the truth. "You bought it?" he spat. "Why the hell would you do that?" "Because I knew you tried to steal it," I replied. "Because that's what you do, Mark. You coast. You take. And Dad? He covers for you like it's noble. Like it's love. You think this makes you better than us?" Dad growled, voice shaking now. "No," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "This makes me free." The room fell into one of those long silences that stretch time itself. You could feel it, that horrible shift from arrogance to realization. I watched the pride fall out of my father's face like sand through his hands. Watched Mark's jaw tighten as he realized the meal ticket had just snapped shut. "You set us up," Mark said like I'd betrayed him. I tilted my head. "No. You set yourselves up. I just paid attention." Dad stepped forward, finger pointed like he used to when I was 15 and grounded for speaking up. "You think this is some kind of victory? That money makes you a man?" "No," I said. "But building a life after you told me I'd never amount to anything? That did. Every time you laughed when I said I had plans, every time you said I was wasting time, every missed birthday, every insult, I built this with all of that." Mark snorted. "So what now? You gonna evict us?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted them to sit with it, stew in it. I wanted them to remember this moment the way I remembered every one of theirs, the smirks, the dismissals, the years I spent scraping by while they told me I was too soft, too slow, not enough. "You made me feel like nothing," I said, my voice low but steady. "But I was watching. Every time you pushed me down, I took notes. I turned it into fuel." Mark threw the papers down. This is sick. No, I said. This is justice. They didn't say anything after that. Just stood there. Lost. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet one because I didn't know what to say. I was the quiet one because I didn't need to say anything else. They finally understood who I had become. They didn't leave right away. That would have been too clean. Too easy. Instead, they lingered, haunted by the sudden shift in gravity. Mark was the first to break the silence again. You're not serious. You can't actually kick us out. I walked past him without answering, through the living room, past the coffee table where I once sat cross-legged at 6 years old, building a model car kit my mom never helped me finish. I stepped into the hallway, touching the edge of the wallpaper where a small tear had been patched with tape 20 years ago. Tape I put up myself after Dad punched the wall beside my head. Then I opened the door to my old room. It still smelled like dust and cheap aftershave, though my posters were gone. The bed was still there. The one with the busted leg I had to prop up with old textbooks. I stood there a long time, just breathing it in. Not the nostalgia. No, nostalgia is sweet. This was different. This was memory. Raw. Unforgiving. A place that had housed both my greatest dreams and my worst humiliations. I turned and called over my shoulder. You have 30 days. Dad's voice thundered from the living room. You're not throwing your family out. This house has been ours For how long, Dad? I asked, stepping back into view. 27 years, give or take. And for most of those years, you treated me like I was some tenant who hadn't paid rent. Mark crossed his arms, jaw clenched. And now what? You think you're the landlord? No, I said, reaching into my coat for the second envelope, the one with the official notice. Now I am. I dropped it on the table. Eviction notice. 30 days to vacate. Standard process. All above board. Dad's face went pale. Not angry red like before. Just white. Like something inside him had shut off. Mark stared at the envelope like it was a bomb, ticking quietly in front of him. You're really going through with this? He asked, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. You laughed at me for years, I said. Said I was wasting time. Said I'd never make anything of myself. But the thing is, I was learning. I was building. While you were busy coasting on Dad's favors and blaming everyone else for your failure, I built a business. Bought 3 properties before 30. Lived lean. Invested smart. Dad finally found his voice again. You think money makes you better? No, I said, stepping closer to him than I had in years. But I'm not the one who sold his son's respect for the cost of a used car. That one landed. His face twitched, his hand gripping the edge of the table like it might keep him upright. Mark stepped back, suddenly unsure of where to stand. You're not family, Dad muttered bitter and low. You're just a stranger with a checkbook. I nodded once. You're right. And in a month, you'll be strangers to this house too. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't scream, even though I could feel my chest burning with everything I'd held in for years. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, the place where I once stood hungry, staring at a fridge full of food that wasn't for me. I opened the fridge now. Empty. Not even a light bulb. Fitting. In the pantry, I found a single dusty can of beans. I picked it up, looked at the expiration date, and smiled. 2012, the year I left home. Somehow, it felt poetic. I walked through the rest of the house in silence. The hallway. The den. The back porch where I used to sit on rainy days just to get away from the yelling. Each room was like a page in a book I never wanted to read again, but now I had the pen. When I circled back to the living room, Dad was seated on the couch, staring at nothing. Mark was pacing like a caged animal. I'll be by with a moving company in 2 weeks, I said. But you have until the end of the month. And then I added softly, I suggest you start packing. I left them there, 2 men who had always believed they were kings of the house. But now, they were squatters with no ground left to stand on. Outside, I stood on the front lawn and looked at the house, not with hatred, Not even with pride. Just clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. The news didn't stay between the walls of that house for long. By the weekend, my phone was lighting up with numbers I hadn't saved in years. Aunt Lillian, Uncle Rob, even cousins I hadn't heard from since I was 19. Word spread faster than I expected. I guess when the family tyrant gets dethroned, everyone wants front row seats. Aunt Lillian was the first to show her cards. "I always knew your father was too hard on you," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, like we'd been close all along. "But evicting them? Don't you think that's a little much?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "They sold me out years ago," I said. "I'm just finishing the chapter they started." Click. She hung up. I wasn't surprised. The older generation had always been complicit, turning a blind eye to the way I was treated, smiling through Dad's backhanded comments. Mark was the golden boy. I was the phase they hoped would pass. But not everyone played it the same. Daniel, my cousin from Mom's side, called me that evening. "Dude," he said, "I heard what happened. You okay?" I was surprised by how good it felt to hear someone ask that. Not challenge it, not lecture me, but check in. "I'm better than I've been in years," I said. He was quiet a beat, then said, "You know, your dad used to brag at cookouts about how you ran off to play entrepreneur. Said you were wasting time while Mark was handling the real stuff." I exhaled slowly, my jaw tightening. "Yeah. I remember." Daniel chuckled. "He doesn't look so smug now, huh?" And that's when it hit me. This moment wasn't just mine. My father's downfall, Mark's unraveling, they were symbols. Warnings. Proof that the world didn't always bend to bullies. Back at the house, things had shifted. Mark tried to put on a show, started posting Instagram stories about new opportunities and blessings in disguise. But I knew the truth. A friend in real estate whispered to me that Mark had been turned down for 3 rental applications already. Bad credit. No job. Too many red flags. As for Dad, he stopped answering the phone altogether. No fight. No calls. Just silence. I think part of him never believed I'd follow through. But the movers were scheduled. The legal process was underway. And the house? It was being gutted. I had contractors strip the walls, rip out the carpet, change the locks. Not out of pettiness. Out of necessity. The house needed cleansing, physically, emotionally. Then came the final box. One I hadn't expected. The foreman called me on a Tuesday morning. "Hey, boss," he said. "We found something behind a panel in the attic." It was a box. Old, dusty. Stuffed with papers, photos, and a letter. From my grandfather. Addressed to me. My hands shook a little as I opened it. "Son," it read, "if you're reading this, then this house is yours now. I tried to set things up so it would go to the one who needed it most. Not the loudest. Not the favorite. The one who sees value in what others throw away." I stopped reading right there. Because in that moment, everything clicked. This wasn't just a house. It was the test I never knew I'd passed. I sat on the attic floor for what must have been an hour. Just me, the dust, and my grandfather's shaky cursive on yellowing paper. There were more words, words that hit harder than I expected. "I saw how they looked at you. Dismissed you. Your father, he was always too proud. I tried to teach him better, but pride's a hard disease to cure. If you're the one holding this, then I trust you found your way without their help. And if so, I want you to know, I saw you. Even when they didn't." I blinked fast, trying to fight the sting in my eyes. I hadn't cried in years. Not when I left home. Not when I slept in my car the night I missed rent. Not even when my first business collapsed and I had to start over from nothing. But this letter? It cracked something open. I read it again. And again. Each word a bomb, each line stitching up a part of me that had long since gone numb. He'd left a photo too. Me at maybe 7 years old, sitting on the porch next to him. He was showing me how to tie a fishing knot. I remember that day, not because we caught anything, but because he was the only one who talked to me like I mattered. Downstairs, the contractors moved furniture out with the kind of clatter that usually would have spiked my anxiety. But not that day. That day, I stayed in the attic, letting the stillness settle. The house felt different. The air was lighter. Maybe it was the empty walls, or maybe it was just the first time in my life I didn't feel like a guest in my own story. Later that evening, I stood in the backyard, same overgrown weeds, same leaning fence, but for the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting to be judged. I was just there. Still. Whole. Mark texted me that night. Said he found a place with a friend in some neighboring town. No apology. Just a line about moving on, and no hard feelings. I didn't respond. Dad never reached out. Not once. And that was okay. I didn't need him to. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I wasn't trying to mend something that had never truly existed. Instead, I stood in the heart of the house I'd once been exiled from, turned off all the lights, and sat in the dark. Not afraid. Not angry. Just finally free. I started small. New locks first. Then the doors, solid wood, no creaks. The walls got fresh paint, soft grays and clean whites, nothing like the stale beige Dad insisted on for years. I had the kitchen gutted next. That same kitchen where I used to stand on tiptoe just to reach the cereal box, only to have Mark slap it out of my hands. For fun. Now it would be mine, every inch designed the way I wanted, down to the drawer pulls. But it wasn't about aesthetics. It was about reclaiming space. Each nail driven in was a step back toward myself. Each tile laid down in the hallway felt like a quiet act of justice, solid, undeniable proof that I had survived them. I kept the layout mostly the same. I wanted the echoes to stay. Not as reminders of pain, but as proof of what I'd come through. I even restored my old bedroom first. Not to sleep in, but to stand in. To look around and feel how small it used to feel, and how small they had tried to make me inside it. Now, it was just another room in a house I owned. Funny how different that felt. I didn't throw a party. No ribbon cutting. Just me and a contractor named Vince, who nodded in approval one afternoon and said, "Whoever tried to tear this place down clearly had no idea what they had." I smiled. They never do. At night I'd sit on the back porch with a beer and my grandfather's letter. Sometimes I'd read it out loud. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because some part of me wanted him to hear it. Wanted to believe he could see the house now. The peace in it. The stillness. One morning, I got a letter from the county clerk. Just an update, official recognition that the LLC I'd set up now had clear title to the home, utilities transferred, taxes settled. All mine. I folded it neatly and slipped it next to Grandpa's letter. 2 documents. One past. One future. And somewhere between the two, I'd found my footing. People often think healing comes in fireworks or breakthroughs. But sometimes it's as quiet as a closed door. A fresh coat of paint. A light switch that works because you fixed it. That's the kind of healing that lasts. I never set out to teach them a lesson. I just wanted peace. A kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission or apology, just space to breathe and be. If I could tell anyone walking a path like mine one thing, it's this: you don't need their validation to become whole. You don't need the ones who tore you down to build you up again. You just need the courage to walk away, and the patience to build something better. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't anger. It's success. It's silence. It's standing in the house they said you'd never earn, looking around and realizing you never needed them to see your worth. You just needed to see it yourself. And now? I do.